So we are in the second part of how Aurelian restored the Roman Empire by HisotryMarche.
Hey guys, if you missed part 1 of this mini-series, you can find it here. Following the victory over the Goths in the Balkans, the flagging morale of the Roman forces had been restored, and with a restructured Danubian frontier, Aurelian could now muster strong field armies for the campaigns ahead, without compromising the empire's security. The emperor wintered in Byzantium, making preparations for the upcoming war with Zenobia, and ensuring that the borders would be protected in his absence. Considerable manpower was allocated to defend the Balkans against the tribes from across the Danube. Troops were stationed in Italy to prevent a possible return of the Alemanni and the Iotungi. And in Narbonese Gaul, a substantial presence of imperial troops was required to guard against the Gallic Empire. By spring 272, Aurelian had mustered his own army in Thrace and had completed all preparations. Zenobia, seeing that war with Aurelian was now inevitable, had her son Vaballathus declared Augustus and had herself proclaimed Augusta, the traditional title of a Roman empress. But because of the Palmyrene failure to...
Can't wait to watch Aurelian humble her. Again, we need Rome to be restored, and she's getting in the way of that. So, Aurelian, go get her, bro.
Secure Bithynia, Aurelian was easily able to secure a bridgehead and march into Asia. He sent a second force to make a naval landing in Egypt under the talented Marcus Aurelius Probus, the future emperor. The logistical planning and execution of this invasion marked Aurelian as one of the greatest military thinkers of the 3rd century AD. His plan was a pincer movement on a massive scale, a true masterclass in strategic warfare.
Finally, I'm happy now we're getting into the in-depth look of his military thinking and genius. Because, like I've said, we often hear Aurelian just won and beat everybody up, but I've been wanting to see just how did he do it? What tactics did he use in pitched battles? What strategies did he use? What maneuvers? And now we're finally getting to the part where we're seeing in depth of what's going through the man's mind, and I'm liking it so far. Ambitious, but I trust if anyone can pull off, like with pincer moves in the past, we covered them on this channel. Oftentimes, we didn't always see them executed flawlessly due to, issues. Like, it is an ambitious move. If pulled off, great, but oftentimes hard to pull off. Though I trust if anyone can pull it off, Aurelian can.
This video is brought to you by... Aurelian's war against Zenobia had 2 objectives. The first was to recapture those parts of the empire over which Zenobia had recently established her dominion. The most important of these were the wealthy provinces of Asia Minor, with their significant tax contribution to the coffers of the imperial government, and Egypt, with its vital supply of grain. The Mediterranean area of Syria, particularly the city of Antioch, was of secondary but still considerable importance. The emperor's second objective was to eliminate Zenobia and to reduce the power of Palmyra so as to avoid a repeat of this dangerous situation.
Heck yeah. Literally put a bounty on her head.
However, Aurelian knew that Syria would be heavily defended and that a prolonged war there was possible. This would prevent him from reaching Egypt by land, which he urgently needed to recover to secure a steady flow of grain, as well as revenues from the Red Sea trade. This was the main reason for his ambitious naval invasion to open a second front. The Roman fleet reached the Nile Delta sometime in the spring of 272. Very little is known about the campaign itself. Upon making landfall, Probus initially fought with success, but was then nearly captured. Further reinforcements helped him gain a foothold against the Palmyrene garrison, and by early June, Alexandria was safely back in Aurelian's control. Probus then began operations to retake the rest of Egypt. Meanwhile, after crossing into Asia Minor, the advancing Roman column was triumphantly welcomed by the inhabitants of Bithynia, who had successfully resisted Zenobia's domination. In Galatia, any Palmyrene troops stationed there were certainly not numerous enough to stop Aurelian's army, and they quickly withdrew to the southeast, bringing valuable intelligence about Aurelian's advance. With the loose Palmyrene hegemony evaporating before him, the emperor was welcomed without a struggle by the citizens of Ancyra, the provincial capital. After making sure that his supply lines were secure, from here he proceeded southeast towards the Cilician Gates, a chasmic pass through the Taurus Mountains that connected the Anatolian Plateau with the Cilician Plains and Syria beyond. However, before he could reach the pass, his route took him to the town of Tyana in Cappadocia, which was strategically located along the route to Syria. The town refused to open its gates, but Aurelian could not afford to leave a hostile garrison along his lines of supply. Angered, he ordered the city besieged, pledging that he would not leave even a dog alive once the city had fallen. Desirous of plunder, I
don't know, Aurelian. I think the dogs can be left alone. As a dog man, I think that's a bit too far. Like, you want to kill all the people, go for it, but don't kill the dog. I'm joking, I'm not that callous. But I would prefer the dogs live. You know?
Soldiers pursued the siege with all the more determination. The machine-like manner with which the Romans slowly choked the city over the course of several weeks spread fear among some sections of the population. With the pressure mounting, Tyana capitulated when one of the frightened residents betrayed the city to the emperor by showing to him a weakness in the wall. The capital of Cappadocia was now in the emperor's hands. But Aurelian thought better of his previous intention to massacre Tyana. With an insight rare among 3rd century emperors, he realized that sparing the city would set a precedent far more potent in the coming conflict. He ordered his army not to harm Tyana, thus presenting himself to the populace as a liberator rather than a conqueror. But his
good PR move, Aurelian. And the dogs are spared, and everything is good.
Troops were none too pleased. They expected to be allowed to plunder the city, and angrily demanded that Aurelian stand by his promise.
Oh no.
This was indeed a dangerous move. Amidst the heightened political military tensions of the 3rd century, many an emperor and usurper were lynched by their own soldiers for refusing plunder. That Aurelian managed to survive this encounter reflects his ability to foster strong relations with his soldiers at a time when armies were prone to rebellion against their commanders. Not allowing himself to be intimidated by his men, the emperor admitted that he had indeed ordered that no dog in Tyana be allowed to live. Accordingly, he ordered his soldiers to kill all dogs in the city.
Oh, wait a minute.
The anger of the soldiers was dispelled by their laughter at this response.
Oh my god. Oh, I got so scared.
Aurelian went on to explain his decision to the troops. We waged war to free these cities. If we pillage them, They will never trust us.
Okay. Luckily, he rolled a nat 20 in humor. I'm joking, but I'm nervous. Can we get out of here? I don't want the dogs to die. But again, it's so far Aurelian. I don't know how this is gonna end, but let's just see. I'm not gonna be at ease until we get out of here.
This display of sound political judgment showed that he understood that Zenobia was a formidable foe, and that he had better chances of defeating her through clemency rather than terror. With the capture of Tyana, the way to Syria now lay.
That's smart. So I wanted to comment. I think that's a great way he's going about it. His PR image is boosting. He's not a conqueror, he's a liberator, and everyone loves liberators. So, again, everything is great. And the dogs, I hope, weren't killed. They seem to be alive, so everything is good. And that was nerve-wracking, right? Like, your soldiers can murder you at any moment, so I think his way of getting out of them through that kind of disarming of tensions through the joke of killing the dogs and whatnot goes to show that Aurelian wasn't just a great military mind, but a great political mind as well, an all-around great emperor.
Open. Aurelian's army marched into Cilicia without resistance, likely passing through Tarsus, the provincial capital, before heading east through Issus, where Alexander the Great had won his famous victory over the Persians. From here, the Roman emperor reached the port of Alexandretta. Although he had gained control over Asia Minor with relative ease, before him now lay Syria, the heartland of Palmyrene power. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Probus managed to topple the resistance and regain control of the province. He then proceeded to march towards the Levant. He pressed the Palmyrenes from the south and perhaps secured the loyalty of the Cyrenian Third Legion in Arabia, which had been previously subdued and its general killed by Zenobia.
Look at this beautiful pincer movement from Aurelian. Look at how he's managed to completely take most of Zenobia's gains and now has isolated her on two fronts. That's amazing.
To address this, Zabdas detached a considerable force in anticipation of Probus's advance on Palmyra. Having lost Alexandria, the queen now had one remaining mint under her control in Antioch. Knowing that this would be Aurelian's first objective in Syria, it was here that she and her generals stationed Palmyra's forces in preparation for the Roman advance. Aurelian's army consisted of legionary detachments drawn from Rhaetia, Noricum, Pannonia, and Moesia, as well as Praetorians and Moorish and Dalmatian cavalry, who served as elite mounted units. Zabda's army consisted of Palmyrenes and other Syrians, but also various other Roman units that had declared their loyalty to Queen Zenobia's family. Palmyra's greatest advantage over Aurelian's army was their Klebanari, or super-heavy cavalry. These mounted units were better armored and more numerous than Aurelian's Dalmatians and Moors. The Roman emperor began crossing over the mountains. He had received unwelcome reports that the Palmyrenes lay between him and Antioch. Zabdas drew up his army in the Orontes plain on the western side of the Lake of Antioch to the north of the city. Here, he could intercept Aurelian's advance along the road from Alexandretta at a narrow point where the flat terrain was especially well suited to the battle tactics of the Palmyrene heavy mailed cavalry. However, Aurelian refused to fight Zabdas on the battlefield of his own choosing.
seizing the initiative, I see, Aurelian, which is always the best thing you can do. Never fight the enemy in their terms. Make your own. Take that initiative, take the victory. And again, so far it seems like, as he's mentioned, the enemy has heavy cavalry. That's their main advantage. Aurelian, on the other hand, I think Gallienus's reforms really helped the Romans increase their cavalry game, you know? Yeah, the thing is with Gallienus, I know that some of his reforms is that Rome, I think before him, utilized their main strength seemed to be in their infantry. And oftentimes Rome had their biggest losses simply because their enemy's cavalry was just better. Like with Hannibal, for example, the Numidian cavalry did heavy damage and kind of helped a lot. And, you know, Gallienus, I believe, reformed the army to be a lot more cavalry-centered, so that could allow him to move around the empire quicker and defeat more enemies. And, you know, that continues with Aurelian, who was a cavalry commander. So I think the crisis of the 3rd century is where the Romans really stepped up their cavalry game. Because before that it seems like they really utilized more their infantry. Their infantry was kind of the main source of the Roman power. But again, like, I think they really stepped up their cavalry game, so it's not as easy, you know? But still, I think just the advantage of heavy cavalry is a little negated just by that, because the Romans definitely stepped up their game. Their cavalry game, as it were.
Knowing that a direct assault would be to surrender operational and tactical advantage to the enemy, he instead decided to march to the east of the lake, seeking to outflank the Palmyrene position.
The flank. Oldest trick in the book, Aurelian. Let's see if it works.
This maneuver had 3 advantages. First, the Palmyrenes anticipated a frontal assault from the north and might become confused by an attack from their rear. Second, he would block the enemy's line of retreat to the east, and if he could reach the city, he could also close off the road leading south. Lastly, the terrain south of the lake was less suited to Zabda's formidable cataphracts. However, the Palmyrene general got wind of Aurelian's maneuver. Having already stationed a small contingent to guard the road to Beroia, he sent his elite heavy cavalry to bolster their ranks. He could ill afford to lose his line of retreat, so it was imperative that they intercept Aurelian's army on the plain to the east of the lake before they could reach the hilly terrain further south, where his cavalry would be at a disadvantage. The Emperor's scouts soon brought back reports of Palmyrene movements. Realizing he had lost the element of surprise, Aurelian led most of his cavalry ahead of the main body of the army. He was well aware of the fearsome reputation of the Clibanarii, and did not want to risk his infantry against Zabdas's heavy cavalry.
At Wells Fargo, we get it.
It was a hot June morning. The Roman Emperor marched at pace well ahead of the rest of the army, with a cavalry contingent of around 5,000 strong, hoping to outflank Zabdas at Antioch. With him, he had the veteran Dalmatian and Moorish light cavalry, which had been under Aurelian's command for a number of years before he became emperor, serving as the elite cavalry arm of the Roman army. They were a tactically astute branch of the military, capable of executing battle plans across vast distances with precision, and had participated in numerous campaigns, often being the deciding factor in major engagements. However, Aurelian found that his way was blocked by the Palmyrene heavily armored cavalry.
So this is going to be a cavalry duel. Aurelian doesn't want to risk his infantry. He's taken his elites. he's taking his cavalry and he's going. This is basically, yeah, like I said, going to be a cavalry duel, and again, the thing about Zapdas and the cataphracts, heavily armored, no slouches themselves, but I'm thinking Aurelian's great generalship, his experience, and just the veterans under him might overcome just to those factors.
On the Antioch-Beroia road. Zabdas's cataphracts were of even better quality than Aurelian's Dalmatians and Moors. These troops had been forged in the fire of the Persian wars, and perhaps represented the very pinnacle of cavalry warfare in the 3rd century AD. It is likely that
Never mind, these guys are also experienced too, so, crap. But, like I said, I'm really looking forward, because this is the first time we're gonna see in-depth at how Aurelian, like, operates, like, what tactics he uses. This is the first time. I've often heard just how he wins battles. I mean, I often just hear, he won this battle and won that battle, but I'm really looking forward to finally seeing how does he win. You know what I mean? And, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm really looking forward to mainly that.
Zabdas fielded up to 5,000 of these troops at...
And like the numbers are evenly matched too. That's the thing, huh? They're both experienced, both veterans, both elite cavalries, both of equal strength. Like this really is as close as you can get, huh? To like being as even a fight as you can.
Immae, but their exact strength and composition remains unclear. The Palmyrines traditionally used light cavalry and dromedary archers, so it is possible that these heavy cavalry units were not local and were in fact cataphracts of the Roman army in the east, which were controlled by Queen Zenobia. Rome employed such units as an answer to Persian cataphracts, and they would have been controlled by Zenobia's husband before he was assassinated. This further confirms that the conflict between Rome and Palmyra was, in fact, a civil war. Despite this, ancient sources descended from Aurelian's propaganda portrayed Palmyra as an external enemy, even though they were an integral part of the empire for centuries. Further evidence of this propaganda can be seen in their portrayal of Zenobia as an Eastern barbarian, a foreigner, despite her family having senatorial status.
Yeah, she got the Cleopatra treatment from Aurelian. He pulled out some tricks from Augustus and just used propaganda to make her seem like some foreign, right, like, Eastern witch or whatever. Kind of like Cleopatra was. Seen as, you know, so again, yeah.
The fact that she was of Syrian descent was clearly used against her by the central imperial government. Aurelian presented Zenobia's son as an illegitimate ruler, but ironically it was Aurelian himself who lacked senatorial status before he took power.
Such an interesting political situation, huh? Aurelian kind of did seize power, illegitimately. Even had a hand to play possibly in the death of a Roman Emperor Gallienus. This is, like, quite the interesting thing, that you could even make, like, Zenobia, if she had greater, like, I guess, if she used propaganda as well, could honestly have a lot of points to attack Aurelian, huh?
Was an Illyrian general who killed his way to the throne, overthrowing Quintilius, and, according to some sources, he played a role in the assassination of Emperor Gallienus. Aurelian did eventually get senatorial support, but he had earned it through brute force. Likewise, the troops from both armies used to be part of the Roman military before the war. At Immae, the two commanders fielded their best mounted contingents, both understanding the importance of the opening encounter. Around mid-morning, Aurelian gave the signal. On the other end, Zabdas rose to the challenge. Undoubtedly, the heavily armored cataphracts were encouraged, seeing the light Dalmatian and Moorish cavalry. Little did they know that Aurelian was one of the finest cavalry commanders of his time. Just before the first charge of the enemy, he instructed his men to wheel about and not risk close quarters combat with their heavier counterparts.
Ooh, I'm loving this maneuvering so far. Heck yeah. Okay, we're seeing his cavalry expertise in full display. I'm finally excited to finally see the man, his tactics firsthand, and how he's maneuvered. Already, that maneuver in itself was impressive. Shows the great discipline and control of he has over his cavalry. And, oh, I forgot to mention this earlier. I think it's easier to just frame Zenobia and these guys as foreign enemies rather than fellow Romans. It's kind of like when Augustus declared war on Cleopatra instead of Mark Antony. It's easier to rally the Romans to fight a foreign enemy than to fight other Romans. So I'm wondering if that, you know, has something to do with it. Either way, back to the battle. Great maneuver off the bat from Aurelian.
The light-armed cavalry feigned retreat, inviting the enemy to give chase. This encouraged the Palmyrines to press forward in anticipation of an easy victory. Whenever a minor clash occurred, Aurelian's lighter units would flee. With each charge of Zabdas's cataphracts, the nimble Dalmatians and Moors used their speed to avoid the confrontation and retreat along the main road towards the town of Immae.
Okay, so Aurelian is using his flexibility, greater maneuverability, to his advantage. And I'm wondering if he's trying to tire out his enemies, or is he trying to lure them to something? Because again, like, eventually they're gonna exhaust themselves as they just keep chasing. Meanwhile, these guys can just keep going back and forth, maybe frustrating them, already showing, you know, maybe dividing them in their lines.
The Palmyrines pursued the Romans for several kilometers. Soon enough, the Syrian midday sun began taking its toll. True to the word Clibonarius, meaning oven man, the Palmyrine Clibonari and their horses suffered in the heat, having maintained the chase in their heavy armor.
I see. I think he is going with that. I just said right now that I think he's perhaps trying to exhaust them. And it seems like that is kind of coming into play.
Aurelian noticed the exhaustion of the enemy. On cue, he turned his cavalry and countercharged the pursuers. Taken by surprise, the Clibonari could not put up an effective resistance, nor flee their nimble enemy. The slaughter was terrible. The tired heavy horsemen were either slain in their saddles, or thrown off their horses and mangled by the hooves of friend and foe. Few managed to escape the carnage and find their way back to Antioch. Aurelian's tactics at Immae relied on the veteran Dalmatian and Moorish cavalry.
Again, beautiful victory. He used maneuverability, speed, adaptability on the battlefield to exhaust his enemy. That was just a beautiful display of cavalry leadership, honestly. That was amazing.
Their steely discipline, courage, and their ability to coordinate an effective and timely counterattack after retreating a great distance. Their deadly efficiency demonstrated the Emperor's tactical expertise, as well as his experience as a cavalry commander. In one fell swoop, he had dealt a crippling blow to Palmyra's most powerful military asset, their vaunted heavily armored cavalry. However, further to the south, the Palmyrines still possessed cavalry that far outnumbered those available to the Emperor, including a reserve of cataphracts. Aurelian knew that the battle had by no means secured the defeat of Zenobia's regime, and that the outcome of the war was yet to be decided. Credit goes to our awesome patrons who make videos like this one possible.
Okay, so General Zabdas and the survivors of the Battle of Immae rejoined the main Palmyran army and retreated to Antioch, where Zenobia herself awaited. The rest of the Palmyran forces were at Damascus, distracted by Probus' advance from Egypt. Most of the troops from the two armies did not engage at Immae, but with only cavalry committed. Aurelian's deceptive maneuver left only a few of the Palmyran cavalry alive. However, Zenobia still possessed a reserve Clibonary and a cavalry force larger than that of Aurelian. Okay, yeah, don't worry, I am sub to you, HisotryMarche. And, yeah, I guess tomorrow's the final part, huh? I guess we'll cover that tomorrow.